Well, as for the Monroe Doctrine, I mean, China can't be a colonial power. They've been historically oppressed.
Well, they're certainly engaging in economic colonialism. And certainly, even if you look at, for example, the Solomon Islands, I mean, what they're doing there is effectively undermining the very sovereignty of that country by building a deep water port. And of course, all of a sudden, as the Solomon Islands takes that money and that investment, then of course they tell a Royal Navy ship and a U.S. Navy ship that they cannot dock in the Solomon Islands. That affects our security, that affects our interests in the region, and of course it undermines the security of the Solomon Islands that China is dictating their foreign and domestic policies. So again, they can do that through pure, not actually just taking physical territory, but they can do that through economic means, and they have.
I mean, in the Solomon Islands, we spoke to an official who was essentially purged at the bequest of the Chinese Communist Party for standing up to what is essentially Chinese colonialism in the Solomon Islands.
Exactly, and we have the same person speak here, and those things are going on whilst we're having these rather facile discussions about pronouns that we can use. When I started working at the Department for International Trade in 2017, we recognized over 100 genders. When I left, we recognized over 150. And people take this so seriously. Like if you misgender them and use the wrong pronoun, it's called dead-gendering people. And I was told people could be dismissed by doing that. This is taking this sensitivity to a level of importance that should not be taken, whilst there's more serious matters in the world we could be dealing with. But again, I just don't find some countries very serious anymore. I don't find the United Kingdom a very serious country. I mean, why, when we negotiate trade agreements, do we have to put in gender clauses and all sorts of woke stuff? We're gonna have X number of meetings over the next few years on gender parity in trade. Why? I believe in equality of opportunity for all genders, whether there's two or more. But the point I'm making is that should not be market access. Should be probably more of a priority when negotiating a trade agreement.
Well, I'm curious, I bet in a situation where the UK is trying to work on trade with African countries or maybe Middle Eastern countries, and if they're pushing that, to me, that seems like those countries would look at that and decide to do business with China instead.
I'm afraid, yeah, well, there certainly have been a lot of examples I could speak to whereby we have certainly lobbied, the United Kingdom has lobbied through its high commissions and embassies and other diplomatic representative offices abroad, about domestic laws that interfered in the domestic situation of other countries. But they do that here as well. I mean, I remember, for example, the consulate in Boston, British consulate in Boston was lobbying the state house in New Hampshire. I think it had something to do with the death penalty at the time, not quite sure. And then, of course, they were lobbying the Georgia State House. The British consulate down there was lobbying the Georgia State House on abortion issues. Or, for example, when a state has said, let's have an MOU on trade and market access with the British government, there have actually been British officials say, we don't really want to deal with that state because they're too conservative. And they've taken the whole sort of ESG, DEI framework and impose it upon their dealings with individual American states. And I think, for example, when we're dealing with trade policy and trade negotiations, it's trade that should be the primary issue and not domestic U.S. policy under ESG and DEI frameworks.
Well, so in a sense, isn't that what Wall Street is doing with China? They're not worrying about the human rights issues. They just want to do business.
True, but I think there's a big difference between Uyghur slave labor, genocide, forced organ harvesting, and offending someone because you have used the wrong pronouns. And when you have over 150 genders, it gets a bit confusing, particularly if more than a lot of them have their own pronouns. You can't just say they, their, and them. So again, I think it's we have to look at issues of severity here. What's more important? The total destruction of the culture and genocide, what's going on in Tibet, or offending someone, because of some idea, because they want to identify as something. I think there's been we need to get our priorities straight, and we're not. I mean, I think it's extraordinary that we can overlook the horrors, genocide in China, and then look at all these very myopic, navel gazing issues which don't kill people.
I wish forced organ harvesting in China got the same kind of. It got people as fiery as some of these other issues.
Extraordinary. There's a total lack of priorities in the West right now, where we focus on a lot of things which should not be given the level of importance that they are. And I don't know why we have to start every discussion recently in the United Kingdom, so many discussions talking about the transgendered ideology, and then vilify people who might just take a slightly different opinion. I know, for example, a civil servant who put out in the United Kingdom, put out a tweet in 2015, like 5 years before he was a civil servant, saying he felt that people on the NHS should pay for their own sex change operations and not burden the taxpayer with that. Well, he was summarily suspended immediately on grounds of gross misconduct and told he was a national security threat to transgendered people because they might be frightened to be in the building with him because of a tweet he put out 5 years before he became a civil servant. This is, again, a lack of priorities, focusing too much on issues which should not be that important, worrying too much about offending certain individuals. If I reacted that way every time someone offended me, I mean, I'd be dialing suicide hotlines. So, again, I think we need to seriously readdress our priorities and what's important. And clearly what's more important than that is what's going on, genocide. That's clearly more important.
Well, as you mentioned at the beginning, we are in a Cold War with China.
Yes.
How do you see this playing out? Will the West wake up? What will it take for us to decouple our economies?
Well, I'm very, very confident in the U.S. government, and particularly the bipartisan response to the op-ed that I've written. From my perspective, engaging this in Washington, I'm very pleased. It's been I have a lot of confidence in the U.S. system, and that's probably because I've come from the British system, which is what I've been told Chinese officials themselves call the United Kingdom. They call it decayed, and that's exactly what it is. And so if I juxtapose those two experiences, I have a lot of faith in the United States to address these issues and to survive. I don't actually have a lot of faith in the UK or Western Europe. I found the behavior of President Macron in France and and Ursula von der Leyen from the EU going to Beijing and basically kowtowing to the PRC was downright embarrassing. I thought that was pathetic, and I thought it was immoral, actually, given what is happening in China to people there. I think it's shocking, that behavior. So again, I do feel that there is more of an understanding and appreciation and a resolve to do what's right in Washington on both sides of the aisle.
So even though essentially Blinken and Yellen also went to China and did their kowtowing, you're still hopeful for the U.S.
Agree. I think because we also have a separation of powers in Washington, and Congress has so much more power than, for example, parliaments in the Westminster system do in Canada and the United States. I mean, their committees have very little power by comparison. They certainly don't have appropriations power that U.S. committees in Congress have. I think there's more of an ability to force these issues on the executive. But again, I think with regards to the current administration, I think we're in a crisis of leadership because at the very top we have someone who's simply not always mentally present and who's fading right before our eyes. And I think we need a leader who's actually mentally present and sharp all the time. And I think it's a serious concern when we don't.
I mean, you're basically describing me. Just saying. 2024 is coming. It'll be my
Chris,
year,
you
baby.
could be America's next Iron Lady.
Oh. I could. In all ways, I could identify as that entirely.